right. So last time we were together, we talked about chapter 2, right? With chapter 2, does anybody remember what happened with chapter 2? Yes, Jordan.
The Ashanti tribe and the visitors, they betrayed the people of the village and they started kidnapping them and killing them, and they put them on boats and put them in shackles.
Right. So they ambushed the village, chained up, shackled the villagers, right? Did they kill everyone?
No, they killed
No.
some people.
They killed certain people, not everyone, right? What happened to Amari? What happened to her, Edward? She was captured, right? But what else happened to her, Zane?
She was taken as a slave.
Right, she was captured. She was taken as a slave. Yes, Michael?
She saw her parents and mother die.
Yes, she saw her family die, right? Her family. What happened to them? Do we remember? Arnaldo.
Her mom got captured and her dad tried to save her.
Right. Very good. So her mom was in the middle of being captured, right? And then the father tried to save her, and then what happened after that? Yes.
He got stabbed in the stomach and his mom got thrown to the floor since she was crying. And
Right.
her head hit the rock and she died.
Right. So the father was stabbed in the stomach, and then the mother, as she was pushed down by one of the captors, right? Her head hit the rock and she started to bleed out, right? So now she no longer has her mother and her father. What else happened?
One of the neighboring tribes threw a spear through her brother's back.
Yes, the Ashanti tribe, one of the Ashanti tribe members threw a spear into the into her brother's body, right? What is her brother's name? Do you remember her brother's name, huh? Kwasi, right? Kwasi. So Kwasi was killed with a spear. So by the time we get to the end of chapter 2, what is the mood at that point? Zane?
It's like a tragedy, or is that?
Well, the mood is how the reader feels, right? So what is our mood?
I feel like sad because Amari has her family too.
Right, sad, and Donna agreed with you. She felt sad as well, right? After reading this, that most of the village was, part of the village was killed and then part of it was captured, right? What was the last thing that we remember reading at the end of the chapter? What did it say? Yes.
It said that they were defeated.
Defeated, right? So they felt defeated, okay? Let's see what happens in chapter 3, all right? I'm going to read it, and then the way that we did it before is I'll read some of it, and then somebody will volunteer and then read it, okay? All right, so this one, everyone at home, open up to chapter 3 in our Copper Sun book, and the title of this is Sorrow and Shackles. And as you have been noticing, the chapters are pretty short. So there might be 50, right? There is 50, but the chapters are short, right? It gives you that little bit of information that you need, and then it goes on to the next thing. All right? Everyone has it? Open up. You good? Okay. When the sun rose the next morning, Amari looked with horror at what was once her tribe's village. All of the homes had been burned, their roofs of thatch and walls of reeds consumed by the fire. The charred and bloody bodies of relatives remained where they had fallen, with no one to perform proper rites for burials, no one to say the prayers for the dead. Amari knew that the pale strangers probably did not know their customs, could not understand the seriousness of the proper burial procedures, but the Ashanti were people of her own land, supposedly brothers in spirit with Amari's people. How could they do this and face their own future? She wondered in horrible confusion. It was just one of many questions for which she had no answer. Where did these strangers come from? Why do they want to hurt us? How can I continue to live without my family? It took all of our strength not to look at the bodies of her parents. Amari's heart hurt in a way she could never have imagined. 24 of the villagers had survived the slaughter. She glanced around the group and realized that most of them were around her age, young and fairly healthy. None of the elders had been spared, none of the children. Okay? So here we see who has survived, right? Who has survived? Who are the ones that are still living as she still looks around? Yes, Arnaldo.
The younger and healthier ones.
The younger and healthier ones. And who are the ones that are dead?
The older ones and the young children.
And the young children. Why do you think that? Why would they do that, Jordan?
Because they don't need them. They don't need the young people to like work on the slaves like in the fields and stuff.
Why wouldn't you? I mean, they're young,
I
right?
mean, like, the
They
young
can do
people won't be
something.
able to do stuff. The old people are too old to be able to do.
Right, so the old people are too old probably to be out in the sun and doing whatever they're imagining that they want them to do, right? So the old people wouldn't probably be able to last long, right? But what about the young children?
They wouldn't know how to do it. Like, Bossy, he would probably maybe like play around in the fields.
Okay, playing around, right? So imagine you're on the ship, right? And so on the boat, they would keep the men separate, the women in a different section separate on a different level, and then the children, right? But there wasn't many children, right? So think of it as this, right? So we remember, okay, it's separate, but why didn't they save the children? The children are young and they can live long lives, right? But why wouldn't you, if you were going out with your friends, why wouldn't you bring your little brother or your sister with you? Right, so they said that in another class they would be annoying, right? But what's another word? What would you have to do? Right, Tristan?
Take care of them.
Yes, you'd have to take care of them. That means it's a lot more responsibility, right? To take care of them, make sure they don't get into trouble, nobody snatches them, they don't get hurt, they don't break something, right? That is a lot of responsibility. And so for them, they're thinking the same thing, that if we have them on the ship, it's going to be a lot of work because we have to make sure that these children don't damage something, break something. It's a lot of attention, a lot of work versus someone that's around your age that already knows the do's and the don'ts, right? You know to listen when your mother or your father's telling you to do something, right? You guys already understand that, whereas children don't, right? So that's the difference right there. And as Jordan said, the elders, right? Think about this. You're on the ship for 2-3 months. Do you think they would make it? Right? They probably wouldn't make it. Right? That's a lot. And think of them, some of them never been on a big ship like that. They've probably been on a little boat, but not a ship like that. Right? So you're on a ship that's rocking back and forth. This isn't a cruise ship, everybody, right? Where it's smooth sailing, you've got your pool, you've got your little theater. No, right? It's more horrendous conditions where the boat is rocking, the sails, it's a lot of stress. So the elders probably wouldn't make it, okay? Essie and her new husband, Mafui, huddled together, even though they had been shackled apart. Amari knew that Essie was carrying her first child, for she had announced it with joy just 2 days before. Amari also had seen that the parents of Makafui and Essie were included among the dead. Quadzo, a young man known in the village as a fierce hunter, pulled angrily at his shackles, his wrists already bleeding as he fought through restraint. A huge gash on his head had stopped bleeding, but was open and untreated. He needed the medicine woman to wrap it in healing leaves, but no one seemed concerned about his injury. All of the young male captives had sustained some type of injury. Okay, so one thing I want to mention that Dane said was also they couldn't last without food or clean water, right? The elders, right? Because just think, I mean, you're not getting full course meals, right? You're getting some type of slop. Think of the worst conditions. This is what you're getting to eat. And a lot of elders probably had certain conditions that they probably needed more than what they were given on the ship. So thank you, Danae. That was a really good response. Why were most of the young male captives injured in some kind of way? Yes, Jordan.
Because if they weren't injured, they didn't have like the full strength and to be able to fight back.
Right, but they had some type of injury. That's true. That's true. Why were they injured though? What caused them to get injured? Right, Amari wasn't injured, right, Edward? What because they were trying to fight back, right? They were trying to fight back and they sustained some type of injury because they were fighting back, right? Just like with Amari's father, he tried to fight off the captives, but the captor already knew, oh, he's older. We don't care. Just take him out because we have so many other younger ones here, right? Just think about that, right? Those images, right? We have one of the most fierce hunters who has a really big gash on his head, right? So no one can heal him. No one's being buried properly, right? Just imagine that. If your grandparent or your parent passed away, right, or aunt or uncle or whomever, and they weren't able to be buried in the ground, or maybe we do a ceremony for them. You don't have that, right? How would you feel?
Go ahead.
Jordan said he would feel mad. I would feel mad. I would feel angry. What about you, Zane?
I'll be mad because it's like their bodies are just being left to rot.
Right. They're being left to rot. No one cares, right? And what could we do? We're all shackled up, right? What could we do? We're their children and we can't even help them, right? Finally, at the far end of the huddled circle of captives, Amari spotted Bessa, right? Who's Bessa? Gavin.
Her fiance.
Her fiance, right? Who she was betrothed to, right? He looked at her with glazed satin eyes. In the distance, where such a short time ago he had played with such power and joy, she spotted his beloved drum, crushed and in splinters in the dirt. Amari wished she could smile at Bessa to give him hope, but she had no hope to offer. He looked away. Suddenly, one of the pale-faced men with the death sticks came over to them, shouting in a language she did not understand. He made it clear, however, that they were to get up from the ground immediately. Most of their captors, both black and white, carried both whips and fire sticks. Amari looked around in fear and tried to ask what was happening, but all she received in response was a vicious slice of a whip across her arms and neck. She cried out as she arched her back in pain, but she hurried to her feet and asked no more questions. She glanced at Bessa. His face was distorted with anger. So just imagine that, right? Put yourself in those shoes. Somebody that you were supposed to be married to, and your future fiance, right? Somebody whips her, right? She's never been treated this way. No one in this village has been treated this way, right? But she gets whipped. How do you think he feels? How do you think he feels? Yes.
Sad and angry.
Sad and angry. Why? Yeah.
Because he doesn't want her to be treated badly.
Right. He doesn't want her to be treated badly. And what else? Arnaldo.
Probably frustrated because he can't protect her.
He cannot protect her. He's frustrated, right? Imagine that. You see someone in a situation and you know you cannot help them, right? You know the feelings that you have for this person, you care about this person, and here someone else is whipping them, right? And even for Amari, she finally had the courage to actually say something, right? Because all this time, she didn't say anything, right? She's been quiet this whole time. And then finally, she decided to ask a question, and they whipped her, okay? And we also see that the captors are black and white, right? The Ashanti tribemen and the slave traders. One of the pale men then brought out objects that she would not have even used on animals. They were similar to the iron bands on her wrist, except these fit around their necks, right? So now they had something around their necks that she said she wouldn't even put on animals. A length of iron chain connected each neck band, so each was linked to the necks in a single file of chains in captivity. As the iron band was placed around her neck, Amari felt as if she would choke. It was cold and heavy and cut into her shoulders. The chain was then pulled sharply as the next person in line was shackled behind her. Amari could not turn and see who it was. She could see only the back of the person in front of her. It was Tirzah, the young woman who just hours before had been chasing the runaway goat. Tirzah could not stop shaking with fright. The pale-faced men fastened similar irons on their ankles, right? So now they had it on their wrist, now their neck, and then next on their ankles, right? With a short length of chain between them and a longer chain linking each person in the coffle together, thus making it impossible for them to run away or even walk very fast. Fastened together in groups of 6, the wrists, ankles, and necks of each captive were painfully connected to the person on either side. Once the villagers were all linked, a white face pulled the first person with a rope, and thus linked to him, lurched forward as well. Amari stumbled, but the neck iron stopped her fall. She choked and tried to grab her throat, right? But her arms were shackled as well. Imagine that, right? Imagine that. Bessa, Amari noticed, was in the front of his coffle of captives. He would not look at her, glancing away whenever she tried to catch his eye. She realized he must be feeling terrible shame that he could not rescue himself or Amari or change any of what was happening to them. If one in their group stumbled, all of them stumbled, or sometimes even fell, choking as the chains pulled them down together. Beaten with whips if they fell, beaten if they failed to keep the pace, they headed slowly away from everything they had once known. The bright red pain across Amari's back and on her wrists and ankles made her whole body tremble. She felt as if she might pass out. The heat of the sun showed no mercy, and she couldn't even wipe away the sweat that burned her eyes as it ran down her face. Okay, has anyone ever got a cut and the sun is beaming on it?
Yeah.
Right? Or even you didn't know you had a cut, but you felt some type of pain. Now imagine she had like a long whip mark, gash on the back of her neck to her back, right? And she can't wipe her face, right? She can't even try to alleviate some of the discomfort or pain that she has in her back and her neck from the whip, right? And then she has other people that she has to keep in line with. So has anyone ever played that game, Potato Sack? Or two-leg race, where you and someone else are tied to each other with a leg, right? And so in order for you to be able to win, you have to do it together, right? So I'm using that concept so you can understand how they have to walk. Donna said yes, she knows. So you chain or you tie your one leg with the other person's left leg, and then you hop, right, to get to the finish line. And whoever gets there first wins. And sometimes you see people who are not working together, that they walk at different times, that they'll stumble and they'll fall, right? But with this, they have chains. That's even heavier, right? Imagine having a chain around your neck, your feet, and your wrist, right? I mean, we all have some type of animal, right? Or a dog. We have a dog, we have a leash on it. And the heavier the chain, the heavier it is around the dog's neck, right? Do we all know how that looks? So imagine that. And it's 6 or 7 of them that have to walk together, right? And you fall, you stumble, you can't wipe it. It's a feeling of helplessness, right? And I can understand how Bessa feels, right? Seeing Amari like that and then not being able to help himself. Okay? Does anybody want to take it from there? Who would like to read now? Yes, thank you.
So, her tongue felt thick. She was so thirsty and she couldn't remember the last time she had eaten. As she walked, she tried but couldn't comprehend the incredible cruelty of the men who had done this. Nothing made any sense. Her stomach knotted up every time she thought of her last glimpse of her mother and father. Dead, unburied, and covered with flies. And little Kwasi, he was just a small boy who had never even heard a grasshopper. How could he be dead? Amari felt dizzy, but she dared not stop or stumble. The first path they traveled was the long road that led from their village to the big river several miles away. It seemed as if even the trees bowed their heads as they passed. The birds, normally full of chatter, were silent as the group marched past them for the last time.
And we remember in chapter 1 where when all the killing was happening, right? What were the animals doing? Do we remember what the animals were doing? Yes, Tristan. The animals were playing? Fleeing, right? The animals were trying to flee, and what else? What else were the, yes?
They were making a lot of noise.
Yes, they were making a lot of noise. They were screaming, right? As they heard the screams of the villagers, right? As they were being slaughtered. So now we have that the animals are being quiet, right? The same way that the villagers are, right? So just notice that how the animals are kind of in sync with the villagers, okay? Yeah.
And day after day, the captives walked, saying very little to one another or to their captors. One afternoon, Amari heard Quadzo try to speak to one of the Ashanti who guarded them. Why do you do this, my brother? He whispered when out of earshot of the white soldiers. Our tribes have been at war before, the Ashanti responded, a defensiveness in his guarded tone. This time, however, I shall be greatly rewarded. He strode ahead then and said no more. Amari wondered what he meant.
What do you think he meant? Yes, Jordan.
He meant that since they helped them since the Ashanti helped them get captured, they'd get like rewards or something.
What kind of reward do you think, Zane?
I think it might be money or like.
Right, some type of money, right? But not dollars, right? Because they would remember at that time we didn't have green money or pennies and quarters and things like that, right? What would they have been rewarded with?
They would have traded stuff. Like
Right, some type of jewelry or some gold, right? Maybe some guns, right? Because the Ashanti didn't have any guns, right? Those walking sticks, right? That she calls them. They didn't have any guns, so they probably figured, okay, we'll also get some type of guns, right? So let's see what happens next. Thank you. Go ahead.
The wound on Quadzo's head grew swollen and purple, and Amari could tell he was in pain, but he continued on, as they all did. One foot after the other, mile after mile, his face was one of anger and hatred. Bessa's face, when she got a chance to glimpse it, had become a mask. The captives were never unshackled. Each set of 6 ate together, slept together, and they had to urinate and defecate together. They were given just a little food each morning and very little water. Each group was forced into a rhythm, keeping a pace that was difficult for the slowest and the weakest of them as they marched. In Amari's group, it was Terza, who seemed to have given up. She walked slowly and stumbled often. Her back was soon a patchwork of welts from being whipped when she could not keep up with the rest. One night she whispered, "I cannot live like this, Amari. My parents, my sisters, all whom I love are dead. I would rather die than be enslaved like this."
Thank you. Okay, so we have here, right, as I mentioned, they're all chained together, and one of them is slowing them down, right? Who's slowing them down? Yes, Jordan.
Teresa?
Terza, right? Terza is slowing them down, okay? And what does Terza say in this conversation with Amari?
She said that she wanted to die because all her family was dead and it's like no way, I don't know.
Right, she said that she wanted to die because she no longer had her parents, her sister, everyone that she loved was dead, right? And so she'd rather die than be enslaved, okay? And she had a patchwork of welts. Why was that? Why does she have all these welts on the back of her? Right, she got whipped because of all the stumbling and her not wanting to really walk. She doesn't want to do this, right? She'd rather just die. Thank you. Anybody else want to continue on reading? Tristan?
Teresa stopped talking like that. Amari whispered that we must live. Why? She asked slowly. Because as long as we have life, we have hope, Amari said fervently. Hope of what? Escape, perhaps? You are a dreamer, Amari, Teresa told her quietly. I have no dreams left. And the next morning, Teresa was dead. She had simply ceased breathing during the night. The leader of the captor looked at her lifeless body and cursed. He unshackled her, tossed her body to the side of the road, and spat upon it. The rest of them were told to get up and move on. Mari was surprised and saddened to realize that the travel there in chain couple, now 5 instead of 6, was lighter and easier without Teresa. Her heart, however, seemed to beat more slowly and heavily. None of them wept for Teresa or even looked her way as they passed.
Okay. So Amari and Terza have a conversation, right? And what does Terza say to Amari? Jordan.
That she just doesn't feel like she doesn't have any hope.
Right. And what does Amari have, Zane?
She had dreams like of escaping.
Right. She has dreams of escaping, right? And Terza can't even think like that. Right? She's not even thinking like that. She just thinks, I lost all of my people. How can I live? But for Amari has some type of dream, some type of hope, just a little bit of hope that she will maybe be able to escape some kind of way. Right? And then we see that the next morning, Terza she dies. Right? How did she die? Why did she die? What caused this?
Probably from all the wounds and stuff and all the, she was the weakest of the group, so she probably had to use more energy than the rest of them.
True. Very good. Very good. Michael?
She just stopped breathing, and then she ended up just suffocating.
What would cause her to stop breathing? What do you think caused her to stop breathing? Yes.
Maybe it was chains around her neck, or maybe it was just her stopped breathing.
Right. She was weighed down with the chains on her neck, the shackles on her feet, on her wrists, right? But what about this? What about a broken heart? Right? What about a broken heart? Has anyone ever heard of that? Someone dying or passing away from a broken heart? That they're so sad that they cannot see the reason to live anymore? No one's heard of that? Okay, so that happens sometimes, right? And this is what happened with Tirzah, right? Even though she had all those welts on her back, she could still be able to walk on. But because in her heart, all that she loved no longer existed, she seen no reason to live on the way that Amari did, where Amari had hope and she dreamed of escaping, right? Why is it that they felt lighter, easier, right? Yes.
Because there's one less person and less chains and shackles to pull.
Right, because they were pulling her. They were supporting Tirzah to keep her going, right? And isn't it ironic, once she has this conversation with Amari and she says what she says, then the next day that she dies?
She maybe like tried to kill herself.
Well, how could she kill herself if she's shackled?
I mean, maybe she just stopped breathing.
Right, so that's why I asked, how did she stop breathing? What made her stop breathing? Can you just stop yourself from breathing
Your
right
body
now?
forces you to start breathing. It's like a natural thing.
But like she was so broken hearted. So what if she just stopped and didn't care?
Right, she was so brokenhearted that she no longer seen any reason to keep living on, right? Because of course she is way down and everyone else is way down, but what was the difference between Tirzah and Amari, right, Arnaldo?
She didn't want to live.
She what?
Didn't want to live.
She didn't want to live, right? She didn't. What was the point? Live for what? Right? I no longer have my family and what I envisioned as a little girl, what my life would be like. I don't care to see what else is going to be beyond this point, right? But Amari did. Amari still has some type of hope. Do we think it has anything to do with Bessa? On why she maybe has a little bit of hope?
I think since Bess is like, she still has someone that cares about her. Like
She has some type of connection with someone, right?
Yeah, well,
Right?
Yeah, but Teresa doesn't have anyone.
Tirzah doesn't have anyone, right? Not even the goat that she was running after. Yeah.
Maybe she doesn't because every time she looks at Bessa, she looks away because his face is fully like since his face was like a mask.
Right. Yes, they did mention in the book that Bessa's face was like a mask, right? Very angry. So now he no longer was that happy person, and he wanted to. He was very upset now. Yes.
8 minutes.
Okay. All right. So everyone, we're finished reading chapter 3, and you can start working on your questions for chapter 3. It's about 4 questions. Okay. You have your computers working? Okay. So you're just gonna work on chapter 3, and it's just about 4 questions. And remember that you can, refer back to the novel that we just read, chapter 3. And make sure to save your answers. Yes. You did your one?
It's not blue. There we go.
Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay.
Because they're gonna be